we forget sometimes that everybody in this really, really big chain contributes. And I think one of the more satisfying things we can do as leaders, and I'm talking to all the surgeons out there especially, is let everyone on your team know that what they do matters. For my social media presence, it's really the same as a textbook. It's the same as teaching in a classroom, but keeping it very simple, very digestible. And I've been amazed. Some things I've gotten up to 1 million hits.
We got this theme going. We're going to put you and Hanjo. Hanjo was telling us about his pull-ups, so we're going to put you guys side by side at a pull-up contest.
Okay, let's just publicly put it out there. I bet you I do more pull-ups than Hanjo.
Okay.
Oh!
Just saying.
Wow.
The gauntlet has been thrown.
All right, so you got to tell me, we had Dr. Skaggs. You live a high-stress business life as well, so are you meditating?
I'll be honest. I think I am too impatient and my brain is too busy. I think I could benefit from being more disciplined with my thoughts.
I can't let that go. Like, what do you, like, what's going on in your brain?
Welcome back to another episode of Back Talk. I am very excited to introduce this episode's guest, Dr. David Skaggs. He is the co-director at Cedars-Sinai Spine. Dr. Skaggs, welcome to the podcast.
Rebecca, thank you. It's good to see you.
Excited to have you here, and want to start with a little bit about you. Want to find out, how did you end up where you are in your career? What drove you there when you were young and decided to be a spine surgeon? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
So I'm actually hesitant to say this because it doesn't sound believable, but I decided to become an orthopedic surgeon when I was 5. I remember
Really?
I was chatting with my pediatrician. I said, what type of doctor should I become? He goes, well, there's these new ways to like replace hips with metal and plastic when they're old. I'm like, that's it, I want to do that. My entire schooling, I told everyone I want to be an orthopedic surgeon.
That's
Really?
amazing.
Yeah, it doesn't sound believable, but it was true.
And you've never deviated since, from age 5 on.
I actually thought about neurosurgery for like 2 or 3 weeks in medical school and realized that it was too depressing dealing with brain tumors. So, and orthopedics just has like this great camaraderie. It tends to be a lot of jocks, people who are used to taking a licking and keep on ticking, and people who work together and used to teamwork.
Yeah.
Who have been some of your mentors?
Well, Vern Tolo, I'd have to say, would be my primary mentor. I was living in New York, and I flew out to Los Angeles, and I swore I'd never live in Los Angeles because everyone's superficial. And I went out there just to spend time with Vern Tolo. In about 2 months, I said, sure, I'll stay and be your partner.
How long have you been out in LA now?
Probably about 29 years. And I have to admit, it's like living in a vacation. It's wonderful.
So are you like superficial now?
Well, you're the one who said, are you like superficial? So yes, absolutely.
That's amazing. That's incredible.
And I had one other great mentor. It's Dr. Andrew Franz, who is the Dean of Medical School at Columbia University. He discovered prolactin. He was a famous guy. And I remember I went to interview with him. I said, I want to be an orthopedic surgeon. I didn't seem to care much, but he cared if I'd play rugby for them. So he sent me out to rugby practice. I came back. He said, well, I think you found your med school. I said, I'll come here under one condition, if you're my mentor. So then that's how he became my mentor. I used to meet with him, once a month, and it was really good to have somebody within the business that maybe believed in you more than you believed in yourself. And so I try to do that for younger people. I think it's really good to have an older mentor who, believes in someone and is there from the back supporting them and letting them feeling like they're doing the right thing. Because we all know, probably from your businesses too, as you get higher and higher up within organizations, you could be more alone and you could have more self-doubt. So I think the idea of getting a mentor is one of the most important things for not only effectiveness, but happiness.
You know what? I totally agree with that. Everybody needs a shot. I mean, I still remember the first boss I had who saw potential in me more than I saw in myself at age 22, pulled me aside, said, you're going to go as high as you want. And I thought, what is this person talking about? So I agree with you. You kind of need somebody to give you that opportunity and then support you along the way. And it doesn't change. I mean, I still rely on mentors and coaches and, kind of my own personal board of directors to.
Yeah, and one of the things they taught in business school that I think is true is it's more important to the mentor than it is to the mentee.
Yeah.
It's like being a parent of good kids. You get to choose the good ones.
It's true. That's great. So I'm curious, you've been in spine a long time, or in this field, I should say. What have you seen change and evolve the most?
So, I had a big personal change. I was at Children's Hospital Los Angeles for 25 years, and it was wonderful. It's a fantastic place, learned so much, helped so many, kids, and was part of a great team. Then I had an opportunity to go to Cedars-Sinai, and I think I may be the only pediatrician who's helping direct an adult spine team. So that was intimidating. So the pediatric spine surgeon, you can't help be a little bit afraid of the big adult guys because they can be mean and do things that we don't do. And it's just not the case at all. People couldn't have been more welcoming. And I honestly feel like I've done a spine fellowship for the last few years. I go into everybody's room and learn, how do you do this? How do you do that? And now I've been introduced to technology and minimally invasive techniques that I never would have learned before. And what's nice is children are benefiting from it. So all of a sudden, I'm finding myself doing outpatient pediatric spine surgery, MIS. Like, who would have ever thought that would exist?
So what's the biggest difference in the mindset between a pediatric surgeon and now with your experience with an adult spine surgeon?
Being an adult spine surgeon, I think, is tougher because you fail more. You can't always take people out of pain. I think even if the adult spine surgeons do a perfect technical operation, someone could still be in pain and come back and have another surgery and another surgery. And what people don't appreciate is how much that takes out of the surgeon. You put your heart and soul into trying to make someone better, and if they're not better, it's tough to deal with.
So you've actually talked in the past, I've seen you give the talk on it, you and I have had conversations about it, about this idea of meditation and taking care of yourself and so forth. Maybe give us a little bit on that. I always find that interesting when you give that talk.
Yeah, that was, maybe 15 years ago in Spain at the SRS. I was asked to give a talk on meditation. I remember getting up in front of the SRS, 1,000
15 years
people.
ago?
I don't know, 10?
How old are you? Okay.
I'm not too good at remembering.
My point is, time's going by so quickly.
Yes.
It seems like yesterday. Oh my gosh.
I remember getting up and saying, I wanted you all to know that I played rugby and I wanted you to know that I brewed beer, but I didn't want you to know that I meditated. Because at the time it seemed kind of different. And I thought people might judge against it. And now it's something that's becoming popular, which has its own dangers. But I haven't missed a day of meditation in at least 20 years.
Really?
Yeah.
I've known you a long time. I did not know that about you.
Well, I think that's not the type of thing that you talk about. I think that it's easy for people who walk the spiritual path a little bit to become braggarts, and that's a bad path. So I think we have to protect against that.
Yeah.
What time of day do you do it typically, and for how long?
Oh, generally 5:30 a.m., 20, 30 minutes. Even in a hotel, you could always wrap up 2 towels, and you have a perfect thing to sit on. I was in don't take this the wrong way, a hotel room with Jack Flynn 2 days ago. I was like, okay, Jack, you have to 20 minutes, I'm not talking, rolled up the towels and sat down and meditated.
That's amazing. I mean, whether it's meditation or gratitude or any type of daily ritual, I think the benefits show, right? It's been proven that can really change a mindset.
The interesting thing. So a lot of people look to meditation as taking someone who's not doing well, whether mentally, anxiety, depression, whatever, and trying to get to normal. And I like to think of meditation as someone who's normal and getting even higher, using our full potential. And what it really becomes, I think, if you're doing it correctly, is giving back and helping others and sharing love and gratitude. It really should not be about yourself. Hopefully we all do that, just maturing and growing up over time.
Yeah.
It's kind of cool. What we do is make people better. And one of the things I've really come to realize, even more so in the adult world, is how industry and surgeons are truly partners.
Yeah.
And as the technology gets more and more complicated, I think we're more and more dependent on each other. And I'll give you one example. I walked into Cedars, I've never even seen a robot before, and all of a sudden I started seeing screws going in the wrong place. Like, that doesn't look good. It turned out about 2% of the time, screws are going into the wrong place. So we got together with industry in the same room as the surgeons, had real honest discussions, came up with a new plan, and industry had to promise, no, I won't let any surgeon use my robot if we don't follow this plan. And then for the next 300 cases, there wasn't one robot-related complication.
Wow.
And I don't know if we could have done that without industry. I think it was nice feeling like we're truly on the same team, putting patient care first.
That is, go ahead.
Good. I was going to say, I think people outside of our industry don't understand that fully. In the pharmaceutical industry, it's in the research, it's in the lab, it's on the table, it's different. What we do, a company can't go off on its own and just work with just the engineers and invent, because the surgeons are on the front line who touch that patient every day. And I think that's maybe really interesting on this discussion, because I think a lot of people outside of our world don't fully understand that. Because no matter what we design, we can design the best instrument in the world, and the surgeon looks and say, that's great, I can't use that. That's not going to work in a real world environment.
Yes. And it's interesting, even within our world, I sometimes feel from surgeons that they look down upon working with industry in a design team. Like, well, first, it's fun,
Yep.
And you're really having an impact aside from just one person being a piecemeal laborer. So I think we all face a little bit of that. I think anytime people are doing well in many aspects, others are going to be jealous, and we can't let that stop us.
Well, and I think, too, that partnership is so unique to spine. I mean, I've worked in several sectors of medtech, and this is by far the most closely connected we are with our customers. And it's
I didn't
fun.
know that.
Oh, yeah. And when I got into spine 11 years ago, I was actually very surprised to learn that we had such tight relationships with our surgeon customers. But that's where the magic happens. And to your point, it's fun. And to be able to get smart surgeons around the room with smart engineers and brainstorm and collaborate together, it's so fun. I think it's one of the most exciting aspects of the job. And we can't do it without each other. It is a true partnership.
And if you don't mind, the next time I go to Colorado, I hope we go hiking.
Oh,
I don't wanna
absolutely.
forget.
Yes.
So I know that High Ridge has a culture of getting out there and hiking. Which
We
is
do.
great.
We do. In
That's
fact,
fantastic.
that's so funny. Just this morning, my head of legal and my head of R&D, Ryan Watson, were out on an early morning hiking/run. So we do a lot of that.
Type 2
Fantastic.
fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that brings up earlier, as Eric was ironing his shirt, he called me Dr. Skaggs. I was like, no, call me Dave. Come on, we're beyond that. And the truth is that I've worked on enough design teams now. I think that having titles within a design team doesn't help. I think that the engineers and the surgeons and marketing people are all equal. We should all use a first name basis. And I do that with my research teams too. It's hard for the med students. I can say, just call me Skaggs then. But I think once you have different titles, people, aren't quite as open to listening to everyone's ideas as much.
Yeah.
So let me ask you, when you are on a design team, and you've invented a lot over your career, when you think about engineers who are listening to this podcast right now, what are some of the takeaways that an engineer could learn to say, what is in your own opinion and experience, the best engagement of how an engineer, whether it's more time in the OR, more time, communicating, what things do you like out of an engineering team or an individual engineer that you're working with? You say that person really gets it or is very helpful to this process.
That's a tough question. I'm going to think of a good answer tonight. I mean, one of the things is that things could be over-designed. I've worked with some spine implants who are like, okay, you just do these 5 steps and the screw's tight. I'm like, yeah, that's crazy. So I think a lot of times engineers miss the importance of simplicity, and they miss the fact that, hey, you're actually doing this in a hole filled with blood with 2 pairs of gloves on. Mm-hmm. And so, like having this little tiny thing you're working with your fingers doesn't work. They should be big. They should have big ridges. And I love the idea of engineers coming into the OR, in real time, asking questions, seeing how things are used. And I think that the engineer-surgeon partnership is really a wonderful partnership. Mm-hmm. And you both have to just go back and forth equally. And I love that you get like different things made of plastic in our hand. Let's try this out. Like, okay, we'll go back and we'll give you a new one. And I love the iterative, okay, then it becomes metal, and then we put in a cadaver. And I love the iterative back and forth of designing together to get something that really works. And I have to say, one of the most satisfying things I've done in my career is help design lines of spine implants, and just knowing that things are used all over the world, and hopefully, allowing a surgery to be done safer and more effectively. Like I love, and I know you don't want this to be about High Ridge, but I love the derotation system that we helped develop. Mm-hmm. And I think that we are able to really derotate spines with lots of force safely. And I love so much seeing a child's back and front after surgery where they had a big bump before and now they don't. In America, of course, maybe everywhere, people aren't necessarily looking at people's chests. We always look at the back and see the rib hump. The thing we don't know is that a lot of times the kids see their chest having a big bump sticking out. And I remember after we designed a certain line to learn how to derotate better, post-operatively, I had 2 girls in a row in the recovery room crying, saying, "You didn't tell me you'd get rid of the bump on my chest." I was like, "I didn't know I would." And it's so meaningful to them to then look in the mirror and feel like they are, quote unquote, normal.
That reminds me, the emphasis on the patient is so important, and you live it. Internally, we've really tried hard to remind every team member of it. There's a patient at the end of this that matters. And it reminds me of years ago, we did a purpose day. You came out to Colorado and actually talked to the entire organization about what you do and the impact that everybody has on ultimately the patient. And it was really compelling to just remember that our patients at the other end of this, that we are all helping.
Yeah, and that's, I almost feel guilty. That's the thing that surgeons get that the engineers don't get, that you don't get, the individual, gratitude. I don't know if you remember way back, there was a Verizon commercial. There was one guy out front and like 50 people behind.
Yeah.
And I feel like the surgeon is that one guy, who really takes care of the patient is the scrub techs, anesthesiologists, child life, the spine implant companies, the engineers. There's so much that goes into helping that one patient. Mm-hmm. And what's nice is, we're all truly aligned on a team together in the same direction at something much higher than ourselves. Like, I truly believe that people who are happy in industry designing and making better products aren't really doing it for money. Money doesn't really make you happy. Helping other people makes you happy.
Yeah.
I think that's a great point. It doesn't matter which company you're at in medtech. That point is we have a unfair advantage on recruiting and bringing people onto the team because we make a difference in people's lives. And we would talk about that all the time, no matter what company I was at.
Yep.
We make a difference in people's lives. We could make cups or tables or, be in a different industry as an engineer or a product manager or legal, finance. But in our business, we still have a job to do, but we get to know that at the end, everybody on the team, no matter where they are, in some way is part of that supply chain process to help the patient. And that's what I love about the medtech space.
Yes.
We make a difference in people's lives.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was it JFK that went through NASA and he asked the janitor, "What are you doing?" He said, "Helping put a man on the moon."
Yeah.
That's it right there.
Totally.
Love that.
Totally.
Yeah. So one of the more satisfying things I did is I went to a distribution center for Medtronic. And I guess that the people that worked there, kind of knew what they were doing, but they never saw it. And I had a slideshow of showing children before and after, who looked like they were deformed and then didn't. Kids who were in pain every day and then were able to do gymnastics. And it was so meaningful to me seeing, 100 people realize this is what I do every day.
Yeah.
I'm helping kids. And I even do that in my hospital. So within a hospital, they have sterile supply. And it's always in a basement, and it's hot and crowded. It almost seems like, working in a restaurant washing dishes. And when something goes wrong, everyone runs down, like, "Where's my stuff? Where's my trays? Why is there a hole there?" So at like 5:30 in the morning, I got together with all the sterile supply people and just showed them a few slides and say, "Thank you so much for helping this child. And thank you for having 1,000 pieces of metal in my OR. Like, if these all weren't here, we couldn't do the perfect job in this kid." And I think that we forget sometimes that everybody in this really, really big chain contributes. And I think one of the more satisfying things we can do as leaders, and I'm talking to all the surgeons out there especially, is let everyone on your team know that what they do matters. It's young surgeons especially, and I'm guilty of it and I'm ashamed to say it, but you start off being a little insecure, you're worried about how you're going to be perceived by the team. And I think everybody is a little bit short with a scrub technician or an OR nurse early on, and you're kind of ashamed. And that's the time to just immediately apologize. We all do it, and the sooner you get over it, the better. Mm-hmm. But it's tough. You literally have someone's life at stake, someone's bleeding, you're under stress, and I think maybe meditation helps. That's the time to know, like, hey, we're all on the same team. We have this child's welfare. Let's put it all first.
That's a great message around leadership and communication and how important communication is. Sometimes I think in those leadership roles we lose sight of the fact that as leaders we know what's going on day in, day out. But sometimes people who work in a certain segment don't know that. I love the fact you went down to Central Supply and did that, and I think we can all learn from that. And no matter where we sit in companies or in medicine, to let everyone know, we know they're important, but let them know how they fit in that puzzle.
Yes.
Yeah. So last question. You have a daughter who has followed in your footsteps. How does that feel? And tell us a little bit about how she got into a similar line of work.
So I have a daughter named Kira. And it was so the first time I found out, we were in a boat in the Galapagos. I think she was maybe 12. And someone in the boat said, "What do you want to do when you grow up?" She goes, "Be a doctor." I said, "Kira, you never told me." She goes, "You never asked me." So then, she went to med school at Columbia, where my wife and I both went. And yeah, she got into others, but she wanted to go to Columbia. And all through med school, my wife kept saying, "Don't try to influence her." I'm like, "I'm not trying to influence her." And finally, at the very last week before she had to decide on a residency, she calls me up and goes, "Okay, Dad, what should I do?" I said, "Well, do you want my advice? We never talk about this." She goes, "Yeah, give me your advice." I said, "Accept your destiny. You're big and dumb and strong. You know you're an orthopod." So she went into orthopedics. And she just told me a few weeks ago that she's now going to go into pediatric orthopedic fellowship, and she likes doing spine.
That's amazing.
I am so proud of her, I can't tell you.
That's
she's
amazing.
just the greatest kid in the world. And what's interesting is, like, think about her training. In my garage, I had a cast cart, and people would come over once or twice a week, oftentimes who were uninsured, who had a broken bone, and Kira was always my assistant. And by, age 8, she was reading x-rays better than the ED doctors, and we'd set fractures, we'd suture people up together, never any money exchange, of course. And it must have been, it was maybe more wonderful for me than it was for her, to be honest. But now she says, like, "Dad, putting on casts is really easy." I'm like, "Well, you may have had different training than others."
Yeah, exactly. It's in her blood.
Yeah.
So Dave, I have a question for you. You have an amazing social media presence. It's great. I mean, you've got, how many followers did you tell me?
I've been told 7,000. I don't check myself.
7,000. Yeah. So that's impressive, especially for an individual. How did you make that happen? That's my first question.
Well, I mean, to be very honest, I'm not on social media socially. I'm not at all. And, for many days at a time, I just leave my computer and cell phone, and I think that could be a bad distraction, from interacting with humans. However, in the old days, I used to write a lot of textbooks, and the textbook sales have been going down over time. And then the next thing was the internet. Ortho Bullets is amazing. It gets over 100 million hits a year.
Wow.
It's paid for by doctors who want to learn, and I'm the co-editor-in-chief of that, so that's been really fun. And I really see over time that the best way to educate residents is with something within 20 seconds. So they could pull out their phone, waiting for an elevator, and learn a lesson. Now, what's interesting, so my social media presence, it used to be on X or Twitter, and I've kind of shifted it to LinkedIn. And I've been amazed. Some things I've gotten up to 1 million hits. It's like, wow, 1 million hits, that's amazing. I've learned over time to just purely teach one point, preferably with a video and or a picture, and just keep to one point. And I used to do things like, "Oh, I'm here with my friends and I'm so grateful at this meeting." Nobody cares. I'd be like, "Oh, I'm in the board with Pal Gasol trying to take care of kids in Los Angeles." I'd actually lose followers with that one. But if you had a very simple lesson of, hey, if we do a bone MRI, we could see bone without radiating a child, here's a cool picture, lots of hits. So what I've learned is that, at least for my social media presence, it's really the same as a textbook. It's the same as teaching in a classroom, but keeping it very simple, very digestible. And it's been joyful to me to realize it's not just surgical residents, but there's physical therapists, there's non-operative specialists, people from industry. And I feel in some ways it creates a community where we can all discuss something. There's always a few trollers and haters, just best ignored. But I think that people really do want to learn. And maybe for people who aren't in medicine, it's a little peek under the hood of, so what's it like to be a surgical resident? What's it like to go to medical school? And I just put it out there the same for everyone to learn from.
Amazing.
And I find it a very satisfying way to teach people, because in 20 minutes I could put something out there that within a day 50,000 people see.
Incredible.
So it's prolific. Who does it? Do you do it, or do you have a team that does it?
I do it personally.
You do.
And I do it honestly when I'm inspired. So if I'm in clinic or the OR and I want to make a point for my fellow, I'll be like, oh, okay, if I want to teach my fellow this, let's put it on LinkedIn also. And I'd say it takes probably 15 or 20 minutes. And I have a great nurse, Elaine Butterworth, and nothing goes on without her approval. And I'm not kidding. I'll send it to her. I said, do you approve of this message? And she will often make me shorten it and make it simpler. She goes, no video over 20 seconds. I get bored. So she's actually going to be lecturing this Saturday to the Scoliosis Research Society, Young Leader Program on social media presence.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Interesting.
And of course, you don't get paid for this. Textbooks you get paid for. And this is just the joy of teaching. It's wonderful.
Fantastic.
Congratulations.
Love that.
So right now I have a pediatric spine fellow named Vivian Chan who did 7 years of neurosurgical residency, 1 year of adult spine surgery fellowship, and 1 more year with me. And you know what I learned from her? She has size 5.5 hands. I have size 8 hands. And I realized she can't use quite as easily a lot of the surgical instruments that I designed. And I owe an apology to everyone out there with small hands. It's not a men-woman thing. I've been putting implants in my hands and go, yeah, this feels good. I've been designing everything for size 8 hands. So I think that we as an industry have to start realizing that more than 50% of medical school is now women.
Yeah.
And there's more and more people going into spine who are women, and other people have small hands, and we need to start designing for both big hands and small hands.
Yeah, I totally agree. And we think about that too when we assemble surgeon design teams. Having that diversity of thought and perspective is really important. Otherwise, you miss it.
Yeah, and the other thing that's kind of unsaid is surgeons in some ways are piecemeal laborers. A spine deformity surgeon has 100 times the rate of cervical myelopathy as the average human.
Yeah.
And part of it is, we're down there like this for hours, and part of it we did with the high-ridge engineers. It was great. We had people put in pedicle screws by hand versus power, and when you do it by hand, we are violating the well-known standards of how much your muscle should work. So the average surgeon putting in a pedicle screw by hand is placing him or herself at risk for an overuse injury. Mm-hmm. So I think the industry should be moving towards power, and that will also help people who are physically smaller, to be able to, do the same work without exerting, force of their body. And I, personally, I had cervical spine surgery. One day I woke up, my hand didn't work. I'm not kidding. Emergency surgery the next day, and my career would have been ended if I didn't have that surgery.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I didn't tell a lot of people at first. Now it works.
Yeah.
So.
Isn't it interesting in our industry when we were using hooks, scared of screws, then we move over to screws, and then power everyone was holding off on power, and now we're seeing that movement to power and robotics. It's just interesting to watch that progression over the last couple decades.
Yeah. If we think about a neurosurgeon going into the skull, of course they use power to go into the skull. So why would we have thought it's okay to take a big metal spike and go into the spine? It just makes sense to use power.
More control, actually.
They've done studies showing that when surgeons put in a screw with power, as opposed to by hand, there's less wobble. Mm-hmm. If you do it by hand, you wobble, and of course you break that bone-metal interface. And if you do it by power, it's a stronger screw, has higher pull-out strength. And so this is one of the frustrations of my career. So I was a carpenter for many, many years. I used to think of myself as a carpenter that went to med school. And in construction, protecting your body is just the culture. If you get an overuse injury, you can't work, you could lose your house. So all the carpenters use power tools preferentially to manual. And when I first went into the specialty of orthopedics and spine, no one used power. And I literally went to company after company saying, hey, we should develop power to put in screws and drill holes. And all the key opinion leaders said, nope, too dangerous. No one's ever going to use power around the spine. And High Ridge did. The engineers way back when, they took a chance at it, and I think that is now becoming the industry standard.
It's another example of that tight partnership between surgeons and engineers to move the industry forward. It's amazing.
Yes. Yep, absolutely.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You know what the next thing's going to be? I'm too excited about this. A powered screw breaker offer. So at the end of a case, right now what surgeons do is there's one company out there that makes something in power, and I bet you all the companies will eventually. At the very end of a case, imagine a big scoliosis case. Who wants to take a big screwdriver and do this 20 times? We're going to start doing that on power.
Can we call it the breaker offer?
The power screw breaker offer.
I like it. I love
Catchy.
the name. Boom.
Thank you for accepting that.
All right, so I want to ask you about the fact that you played rugby. Right? Was that good? How many years did you play rugby?
Well, I played my first year. I got my knee blown out, so I played rugby off and on for 4 years at med school.
So I played rugby as well.
Ah,
And I played for a little while after college, and then after getting knocked out pretty bad and having a concussion, I decided I probably shouldn't do that anymore, but loved it. And I think all of us believe in this type 2 fun thing. So give us some good, funny stories about you and some things that you've done in your past or your health.
well, so when each of my kids turned 5, I said, okay, you're now my lifting partner. And particularly it was important for my girls, because I think it's really important for young women to be able to walk into a weight room and feel like they own it and they're confident. And with my son, next thing I know, he was getting stronger and stronger. And around age 16, my wife says, Dave, you got to stop this. You know how this is going to end. Because I started trying to lift more. When he was 16, I was probably like, 52. So all of a sudden, I got 5 hernias. I've never heard of 5 hernias. Direct, indirect, femoral, direct, indirect. I felt so bad for the surgeon that repaired me. He looked white. He goes, I've never used so much mesh. So another
5
time-
hernias.
Yeah.
How are you doing now?
Oh, great.
Are you still lifting?
Oh, all the time. So now I have pull-up contests with my daughter. She can do 15. I win.
I was just going to ask who wins.
You
Right
win.
now. You win.
Right
for
now, but I'm sure it's going to go the other way. I'm getting older and she's getting stronger.
We got this theme going. We're going to put you and Hanjo. Hanjo
Yeah.
was telling us about his pull-ups, so we're going to put you guys side by side at a pull-up contest.
Okay, let's just publicly put it out there. I bet you I do more pull-ups than Hanjo.
Okay.
Oh!
Just saying.
Wow.
Wow.
The
Yeah.
gauntlet has been thrown.
Either regular or with a 45-pound plate, whichever he chooses.
Okay.
Oh,
I'm sensing a future back top episode. where
With
we
a
have-
pull-up bar
Yeah,
on. See, that's great.
That's amazing. That's great.
Hey, and all kidding aside, I want to thank you guys for just running a great kind of company for surgeons to work with. It's fun. It's really important for the team to have fun and to know that developing is fun and you can do well and do good. And, we see that the end product is the patient. The end product also is spending time together and enjoying it. It's fun to design new things. I feel like moving forwards with industry and surgeons together, it's kind of special. We're very lucky to be at this place in the world, and it won't last forever, and it's probably better in our industry than others, but it's kind of a nice place to be right now.
Well, thank you for that. Yeah, that
Thank
means a
you.
lot. We feel the same way. It's fun to build a company together with thought-leading surgeons and make a difference at the end of it all, and have fun along the way.
Yep.
Thank
Great.
you.
Thanks,
Thank
Dr.
you.
Skaggs.
Oh, call me Dave. Come on.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for joining us for another episode of Back Talk.
And we want to thank Dr. Skaggs for
Dave.
Dave for his hot takes on spine. Cheers.
Cheers. Thanks, Dave.
Thank you. All right, so you got to tell me, we had Dr. Skaggs. You live a high stress business life as well. So are you meditating 20 or 30 minutes every morning from like 5 to 5:30?
I am not, and I
Okay.
live in Boulder, Colorado, where everybody meditates. So yes, I'm an outlier. I do not meditate. He made some really good points, and no, I do not meditate. But I do think there is something to be said for, as I said to Dr. Skaggs, just taking a moment, pausing, being grateful. I think there are multiple ways you can kind of manage that stress. I don't know. Maybe I should meditate, but I do not. What about you? Are you a meditator?
I am not a meditator. I should. I do use periods in the morning when I'm getting up and getting ready and so forth to kind of reflect on things. I do that.
Reflect
But
and relax.
reflect, relax,
Yeah.
get ready for an intense day. But, sometimes it's a workout, sometimes it's just going for a walk. But getting ready for the day is a sense of trying to center yourself.
Yep.
So it's not the formal meditation that he was talking about, which is probably healthier. But some level of relaxing to get ready for an intense day is important.
Yeah, I think that's true, regardless of what your outlet is. But the benefits of meditation have been proven, as he said. I'll be honest. I think I am too impatient and my brain is too busy. I've tried to meditate here and there, not really, but when I've sort of pretended to meditate, I can't do it. So I think I could benefit from being more disciplined with my thoughts.
I can't let that go. Like, what do you like? What's going on in your brain?
Oh, you name it. You name it. I have a very active mind.
you know, while I don't meditate, I do often listen to podcasts in the morning and so forth. So I think everybody listening should start to listen to Back Talk in the morning when they get ready for the day.
It's as good as meditation.
There you go. Okay, so we are, 3 or 4 episodes in with multiple guests. And so I've got to ask you, you have this recurring theme. Was Dr. Skaggs the first surgery you're ever in, since you continue to have these guests?
You know, what's funny about that is he was one of the first surgeries I ever observed. But I know you're joking, but in all seriousness, it's pretty amazing. I feel very fortunate because coming into this industry 11 years ago, not being from spine at all, not knowing the business, not knowing anything about it, right out of the gates, I was partnered up with some of the thought-leading minds in this industry. Hanjo Kim, Mike Vitale, David Skaggs, and I was fortunate to learn from all 3 of them by spending time in their operating room, which is great. I actually met all of them for the first time that summer that I joined the industry, and then really got to know them well at SRS in Alaska, which we've talked about on a previous episode.
That's when you stole Hanjo from K2M.
Yep,
Yeah.
pretty much. But no, it's been a wild ride, and it's been really fun to have these surgeons in our corner and be partnering with some of these folks. I mean, as we just discussed with Dave, that's what makes this business so fun, is that tight partnership with our surgeon customers. And yeah, I feel very fortunate that I've had the privilege to work with some of the best minds in the space. It's been great.
And it has been fun. I mean, every surgeon we've interviewed, they're dynamic, their background, they all tend to be A-type personalities, and they give great perspective on things.
Yeah,
really
they
enjoyed
do.
it.
They do.
Yeah.
And it's fun for our team too. You know, the engineers, the marketing team. It's really nice, I think, and just brings a completely different perspective to the way we invent and we innovate. Because you got that voice of the customer right there, seat at the table, locking arms.
All right, so you've got to tell me, what do you think? How do you think Hanjo's going to respond when he hears David dropping the mic on saying that he's going to challenge him on the pull-ups?
Well, I did hear you say at the break that you wanted in on the contest, so
No.
But
I want to see Hanjo and Dr. Skaggs go at it. I think.
Oh,
that's
100%. So
we got to do it.
We'll bring him back on the podcast.
Yeah.
And again, you'll be the third competitor because you did say you wanted to join.
No.
You
We're
did.
going to let them go head-to-head on that. Yeah.
Skaggs is pretty confident he's going to win.
I know, that was
He
crazy.
didn't hesitate.
I know. Hanjo is going to jump all over
Yeah,
that.
his competitive juices are
Yeah,
going to
it's gonna be great.
flowing.
It's gonna be great.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, so hot take for this episode.
Yep.
As we think about things that are important to the industry, we talked about tariffs, talked about the changes at the FDA. Here's one everyone's been dealing with, and it's been a consistent theme, and now it's been going on for a long time. What is your perspective on EU MDR and how it's impacting access to technology?
Yeah, that is such a thorny topic. At IMS just last month in Scotland, I actually spoke on a panel on this exact topic and to a global audience of spine surgeons. And it's fascinating the ripple effect that some of these policy changes or implications can have on the surgeons and ultimately the patients. It's unfortunate because we as industry, I'll speak for myself, but I know that my peers in other companies feel the same way. We desperately want to give access to as many patients around the world as we can. And sometimes it just becomes such a headwind that we have no choice. I'll give you an example. Many years ago, when EU MDR started to be implemented, we actually took a hard look at our portfolio. And this goes back to 2016, 17, and we said we simply cannot afford to remediate all of these brands. And so we've got to really kind of cool our product portfolio in EMEA and really focus on the few products that we felt like we could really move the needle. And unfortunately, what's happened over the last several years is we've consistently had to keep looking at our portfolio and make those tough calls because it just becomes so cost prohibitive. On this panel, I was with other industry leaders, and the sentiment was the same. Nobody wants to do this, but we're sort of, our hands are being tied here. And I think the unfortunate reality is the surgeon sentiment in the audience was shared frustration. So I think the surgeons understand this is not industry choosing to not remediate these brands. It really is becoming almost an impossibility, unfortunately. So I don't know where this goes. We'll see what happens as the years play out here, but I'm hopeful that there will be enough products that industry can at least support to keep access out there, because otherwise I think we're gonna have a lot of patients in those countries that are just going to lose out on some of the newer technology and even some of the older technology.
Yeah, I find it fascinating. Having been in spine as long as I've been in spine, for decades, Europe was the first place we would go.
Yeah.
And we would bring new technology to Europe, and FDA was perceived as a more difficult process to get through the 510K process or the PMA process.
Yep.
And there was still a very good process in Europe. However, like so many times, there were some bad actors along the way, in the way of companies, that then the pendulum swung when certain policies got put in place through EU MDR. And now fast forward to today, in the last 10, 12 years, it has been shocking to see the cost to industry, overall, medtech, and frankly, the lack of access to technology for these European countries because of that process. I mean, the cost is so prohibitive now of what has to be done. And it's really, really fascinating to watch that shift.
Yeah.
And as we look at different, if I work with different companies or look at different technologies, now the default is usually let's hold off on Europe. We shouldn't go to Europe. It's going to be too difficult, too cost prohibitive for us. So it's just interesting to watch how this pendulum continues to swing.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate because you and I both know a lot of these European surgeons who want access to technology. But global economic situation, particularly reimbursement in Europe, coupled with EU MDR policies, has made it almost impossible for many of these products.
Yeah, and we're desperately trying. That's the unfortunate part. But the other point I wanted to make is there's a massive opportunity cost, because when you think about all the money that we have spent as industry leaders, everybody collectively, it is hundreds of millions of dollars to remediate these products. And that's money that's not being spent on new product innovation. So there's an opportunity cost there too. And it's just, yeah, it's unfortunate.
That's a great point. You know, I remember, well, my whole career, you'd have a tough surgery, and the surgeon in the U.S. would contact his or her colleague in Italy, who would call his or her contact in France. They would collaborate, call somebody in Spain, kind of figure out how to handle these tough cases. They all have, aligned experience with these technologies. And that's the piece that starts to go away when you go to these European meetings and realize, many of these new products are not going to Europe.
Right.
And your point on the cost that had been put through that process to pull these products out that could have gone towards technology to help with access to patients. So it's going to be interesting to watch what happens.
Agreed. I guess the one positive I would say is that it is, from a business perspective, it is forcing us to take a really hard look at the product portfolio, the clinical data we have behind it. And I will say that some of our products that have strong clinical data, like Mobi-C, it's been much easier to remediate. And so the one positive is if you've got products with very strong clinical data to back it up, that's not a horrible situation. But unfortunately, that's the exception, not the norm.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. It'll be interesting to watch.
It's a hot take.